We talked about the fact that there are signs that you're in that fight or flight, right? If there's like all or nothing thinking, right? This idea like, or I don't have a choice. I have to do something. There's no other option for me. There's many different ways that you can diagnose your own, like, hey, maybe I don't have my full executive functioning online here. And it really does come down to a lot of absolute thinking. It comes down to feeling perhaps like you're out of options, or that you or the path forward really is not presenting itself to you. So Susan, one of the things that we're going to do as we walk through the 6-step process to deal with unexpected shifts is at some point make sure that we are not in fight or flight. And there's a process to do that. Do you want to just share with us, like, what do we do if we think we might still be in fight or flight, freeze or fold? How do we, and by the way, what's really interesting to me is I'm a flighter and I'm a freezer, so I'm either running for the hills or I'm like stuck like a deer in the headlights. So I ask you all the things. Some people are fighters. Some people will come out swinging when life gets at them, right? Some people are quitters. They're like, oh, I'm just going to bed. I'm going to pull the covers over my head. I'm not going to deal with any of this. And some of you are like me, that you're fleers or you're freezers, right? So, but how can you tell if you're stuck in fight or flight or get out of fight or flight? What's something we can do to make sure that the fight or flight has been calmed?
Yeah, and I think it's important to also acknowledge that no matter, as you think about yourself and you notice, oh yeah, I'm more of a freezer or I'm more of a fighter, to just really have complete compassion for yourself around that is something you've learned and is probably one of your earliest responses to stress. That, a stress happened, you were probably very tiny, and you either randomly chose one of those options, or you saw that happening around you. You watched how mom and dad cope with stress and you did the same. So I would categorize myself as maybe a little more of a fighter, that when there's something challenging in my life, I'm like, okay, let's deal with this. What are we going to do? It's not so much of a coming from an angry place. Usually it's just more of a super activated, maybe not always helpful, but I'm trying to learn more and more to settle first and then make the decisions, rather than just, my old MO would be just do something, anything, even if it's wrong, we can always change it. Right. So that's kind of what a fighter looks like. They quickly solve it. Let's get to business. Let's get down to, let's activate, fix it. So, just remembering that no matter what way you cope with an unexpected life shift is okay. It's totally all right. But it is helpful to be mindful of what you're doing and just noticing that and having deep compassion for yourself. And then to check yourself for fight or flight. Those of you who are my students and some of my clients as well, you'll know that I use a very old-fashioned, well-known neurovascular head hold. So I'll just do this here and teach it to you, and I'll get everybody to follow along, not just listen and watch, but actually do this with me. This is the experiential part of the podcast, right? So take your index and your middle finger, and you're just going to allow whatever's coming up for you to come up. And place your fingertips in the middle of your eyebrows and slide up towards your hairline. There's first going to be a horizontal ditch, a skull anatomy. There'll be a little divot down, and then you're going to come up onto these two rounded mounds on your forehead. They're called the frontal eminences, and on the outside of the skull, they're rounded, and on the inside, they're concave. And what happens on the inside of the brain, if you have lots of blood in the front of your brain, is that there's a little bit of pooling of the blood behind these two mounds. And so you will get a very subtle pulse. You don't want to use your thumbs for this because you have a pulse in your thumb. You just want to use your index and your middle finger. And it is subtle, but if there's lots of blood in the front of the brain, in other words, you're not in fight or flight, right? The blood is fully flushed forward. It's nourishing that front part of your brain. And if you hold and wait, you may notice a subtle pulse in one or both of these frontal eminences. And you may also notice that you don't. have a pulse, or that you only have one pulse and not the other, or that you do have two pulses, but they're not synchronized, right? So what you want to do is wait. And you're using the energy of your hands and this sort of physical contact with these points. And if you just sort of watch your breathing, there's nothing you have to do, just being very patient with yourself, which is hard to do when you're in fight or flight. But try to overcome that need to just, oh, it's not there. Never mind, right? Just let that be and just hold those points. And eventually those pulses will emerge and they will synchronize. And then you know you have lots of blood in the forebrain. And you'll probably even notice there might be a gulp or a sigh or a deeper involuntary breath. You may notice that your shoulders relax, or you want to kind of put your elbows down on the table and right. You kind of notice there's a shift in your body to a calmer state. Your nervous system is calming down. So you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system and calming the sympathetic. You're also activating the polyvagal nerves, which also create that calmer feeling where you can actually, okay, now I can problem solve. And if you do this, you'll recognize in brain gym, they call these the positive points, because you start to feel more positive about things. And why is that? Well, because there's enough blood in the part of the brain that does that for you. You'll begin to recognize you do have choice where you thought you didn't. That things aren't black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. That there's not necessarily a good guy and a bad guy in this, but that there's responsibility on both sides of this situation, and that there's a continuum of possibility, opportunity, choice. Hey, that's right. I maybe could talk to so-and-so. They might have a possible lead for me for a job or for an interview or for, they've been through this health challenge. Maybe I'll talk to them. But those people won't come to mind if you're in that fight or flight. You want to be out of that. That's about saving your life in the moment, very, very immediate, and then done. So you want to help your nervous system come out of that state and then come back into the place of, now what am I going to do? And for you to know those choices from a quiet inner wisdom, as opposed to, okay, I got to design something, but actually that deeper level of knowing that may be the way that my friend would solve this dilemma, but the way that I'm going to do it is this way, because I know this is right for me. So that sort of that inner knowing place of, actually, this is how I'm going to proceed from here moving forward, to either solve this or to get through it or to minimize the damage or to ask for help or to get help, right? Whatever we need to make it over the hump. So is that what you were talking about, Sue? That
It was, and I couldn't hold my hands up there for that long. So I
Yeah.
got to work on my arms a little
I
bit.
should mention, for some people, if you tend to be in fight or flight a lot, or you have sort of what we talk about like a chronic state of fight or flight, there's been a lot in your life that's maybe been unexpected or a little shocky, and you haven't actually processed that shock through your body. It can take longer for those pulses to emerge. And as I said, they are subtle. But if you practice this, it could take 5 minutes, right. For them to emerge, but they will emerge. So what I love about this technique is it's not just about, am I in fight or flight or not, but it's also treating it.
Right.
If you are.